Super Mario Land 2 for the Nintendo Game Boy has a peculiar glitch that allows Mario to exit the normal bounds of a level and explore the entire memory of the system. The level data is stored in a small section of work RAM, but with this glitch, Mario can visit video RAM, object memory, and even the cartridge ROM. Each level map in the game is limited to 12,288 tiles, which corresponds to 256 tiles across and 48 tiles vertically. These dimensions can be circumvented by chopping up the level layout at room transitions, as long as all of the rooms can fit within this rectangle. For example, Tree Zone 2 is wider than 256 tiles across, but the first room is snuggled up closer to the rest of the level in order to fit. Since the levels can be broken into pieces, it is important that the camera doesn't scroll in such a way that you can see parts of the level you shouldn't be able to see. Each screen of 16 by 16 tiles has rules for the camera to follow. They tell whether it is allowed to scroll past the edge or act as a barrier. Generally, scrolling is allowed anywhere within a room, but is disabled at the edges of the rooms and at the edges of the level. This should ensure that Mario cannot leave the intended level area. However, with a small glitch, the player can have Mario fall through the floor at the start of any level and potentially leave the intended level area. This glitch is fairly straightforward to execute, but it can only be done on the version 1.0 and 1.1 of the game, since it was fixed in version 1.2 in both regions. If you exit the level while Mario is in a downward pipe transition, this transition state will persist at the start of the next level you enter. The two easiest ways to do this are to die during the transition, or just exit the level via start and select once the level has been cleared already. Then, just enter another level, and Mario will fall through the floor as if it were a vertical pipe. If there is no level data underneath, Mario will just continue to fall through a void since there are no walls to keep him from falling downward. And eventually, he'll stumble upon some really messy garbage tiles. We'll explain what exactly this is in a little bit. In order to understand it better, we need to look at the Game Boy's memory map. The Game Boy has a 16-bit address space, which means the CPU can access anywhere from address hex 0 to FFFF, 65,535 unique bytes. Like most of Nintendo's old systems, this address space was memory mapped so anything including cartridge ROM, work RAM, video RAM, OAM, and other hardware registers could be accessed via certain addresses. The organization of these regions in the address space is like follows. The entire front half of memory from address 0 to 7FFF was dedicated to the ROM image located on the cartridge. The first 16 kilobytes are always mapped to ROM bank 0, but the other 16 kilobytes can point to any ROM bank during execution. This allows for games to be larger than 32 kilobytes in total size. The next 8 kilobytes from address 8000 to 9FFF are reserved for video RAM, which holds graphics and tile maps. Another 8 kilobytes from address A1000 to BFFF are external RAM, which is normally memory that is found on the cartridge itself. Data stored here can persist after the game is shut off and the cartridge removed, since it is preserved by a battery in the cartridge. Yet another 8 kilobytes from address C1000 to DFFF are the console's general work RAM. The next 7.5 kilobytes from address E1000 to FDFF is what is called Echo RAM, which is just a copy of the first 7.5 kilobytes of work RAM. Nintendo discouraged developers from using this area of memory, probably so it could be possibly used for something else in the future. The next 160 bytes from address FE00 to FE9F contained the Object Attribute Memory, or OAM. This area denotes which objects are displayed on top of the background and where they are located. The 96 bytes located from FEA0 to FEFF are not mapped to anything, so they stay unused. From address FF00 to FF7F are the console's hardware registers, which include things like the controller, display, and audio registers. The 127 bytes from address FF80 to FFFE are high RAM, which is very fast since this memory sits within the processor. Finally, The single byte located at address FFFF is the processor's interrupt switch. If we step back and color code the different regions, this is what the entire address space looks like. Let's see how Super Mario Land 2 utilizes the different memory regions. The ROM region, video RAM region, and all of the small regions near the end of the address space are trivial, but the external RAM and work RAM are interesting. The first half of the external RAM contains not only data relating to the save file, but also contains things you would normally see in work RAM, such as overworld and music data. The second half of external RAM, along with the entire work RAM, holds the entire 12 kilobytes of level data. 7.5 kilobytes in the middle of that is mirrored into the echo RAM below. Each byte corresponds to one tile in the level, so we can effectively map out the entire address space by turning each byte into one tile. If we move outside the level data area, you can see how other memory regions would be interpreted as level data. As we move up, we see the rest of external RAM, video RAM, and eventually the cartridge ROM. When we hit the end of ROM at address 0, everything wraps around and we see the top of the address space, including OAM, high RAM, and hardware registers, before returning to the actual level data again. Using the pipe persistence glitch, we can actually exit the intended level area and explore the rest of memory if we are careful. We can actually modify some of the memory addresses if they contain values that correspond to tiles that could be manipulated by Mario. For example, if a value corresponds to a brick block with a value of 0, we can break it with Super Mario to change the value to an empty tile with a value of hex 60. There are a few points that need to be made about this out-of-bounds area. Since these memory values were never intended to be drawn on the screen as tiles, they can act really strange if you don't know what's going on. The game can even crash if certain tiles are interacted with. First of all is the fact that some tiles don't match up with the tile that is shown on the screen. In normal gameplay, tiles only change state when they are interacted with by Mario or other sprites. So once they are drawn to the screen, their visual appearance won't change even if the underlying value does, unless, say, Mario jumps into it. A good way of showing this off is the first layer of garbage tiles that show up after falling out of bounds. These tiles correspond to OAM. Their underlying values correspond to the current objects on screen, which are Mario and the fireballs he shoots. But down here out of bounds, these values also correspond to the first row of blocks. Every time Mario's image changes or he shoots fireballs, these tiles change how they act, but not how they look. That is, unless a tile is interacted with, like this coin, in which the object's data is updated along with the tile's data. That's why it looks like Mario can just randomly phase through some of these blocks. They are actually disappearing and reappearing behind the scenes. If the game refreshed every tile on screen every frame, this is what this section would look like. The second thing to be careful of is modifying values that are crucial for the game to continue running smoothly. Modifying data in video RAM can cause weird graphical glitches, and messing with anything in the stack or memory mapper can easily crash the game. However, if you know what memory value you are looking for, you can really take control of the game. The memory address A2D5 holds an unused debug flag that triggers the ending sequence of the game. It is never written to directly, but it is read every time Mario enters a level from the overworld. As long as this value is set to some non-zero value, it will instead load the credits. Remember how blocks correspond to the value of 0, and breaking them sets the value to hex 60? By finding the tile that corresponds to memory address A2D5 and breaking the block that sits there, the credits can be triggered prematurely. Indeed, this is possible to do thanks to the pipe persistence glitch. Looking at the map we made, memory address A2D5 is actually above the level. However, since the whole thing wraps around vertically, we can reach this tile by falling through the entire address space and digging down to break the block. Here we can watch as Mario enters Pumpkin Zone 1 and makes his way downwards towards the address in question. Among the mess of tiles are some tiles that act like pipes, which can help maneuver Mario through the garbage, especially if there are a lot of solid blocks in the way. Just like how all of these tiles are read from unintended memory, the camera screen values are also read from unintended memory. This causes the camera to act a little odd, and in some cases you really need some persistence to get through to the next screen. Finally, when the block is broken, the level can be exited by dying or pressing Start and Select. Re-entering the same level will now just trigger the credits since the flag was set to 60. As of the creation of this video, the fastest someone has triggered the credits in real time was 2 minutes and 42 seconds by Oh Dear. If you would like to watch these speedruns, a link to the leaderboard can be found in the description below.